Hello. I was talking this entire time, but I had the thing muted because I was being smart. But then I had my actual mic muted, and I forgot about that. Um, but we've upgraded. We have a little animation. It's a little waiting animation. Tells you to wait. You have to wait. That's what it says. And so you guys fucking better. You guys fucking better wait. But yeah, and so this animation took me like 10 minutes to make. Okay. But figuring out how to do the animation took me like 2 days. Okay. Like 2 fucking days. And towards the end, I just got pissed. And so I was gonna make it look a lot nicer than it is now. But then I got pissed and upset. And so I was like, fuck this. I'll I'll just make a basic one. I'll make a proof of concept, and I love it. And I love my little animation. I love my little ant, just fucking walking. Just made an ant walking. Doesn't have any antenna, but we don't. He doesn't need antenna. Okay, he's good. He doesn't need it. And so you just have to wait. But you have to wait. All right. But you know what? Waiting is actually over. We're actually switching. And there we go. And we did it. And we did it. We figured it out. We hacked the matrix. How can I go to the I went to go more over. That didn't work. That didn't fix my issue. Okay, we're just gonna zoom out a little bit. Okay, that's good. There we go. Ninja says, I'm now going through the motions of just watching the latest episode of The Amazing Digital Circus. I've not felt a fear creep up and grab me until watching that. I don't know what that is or what you're talking about. Uh, but but yeah. But something. What does it have to do? But basically, we will possibly be finishing. We will possibly be finishing the book today. We'll possibly be finishing the book today. Isn't that exciting? It's been, I think, 3 months since we started. Maybe less. Maybe it's been 2 months. I don't know. Um, but we're literally about to be finished. We literally have 19 more pages left. We have about 19 more pages. It ends on page 228, I think. Somewhere around there. So it's about 20 pages. And so we're going to try to finish. Hopefully. Alrighty. And so I see no reason to delay any further. I've delayed enough. I delayed enough. We saw my little animation that I made. I made it myself. And you can tell it's mine because it took me way too long for what it looks like. And it's because I'm technologically illiterate. And that's my one weakness. I don't understand. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. But I figured it out, and now I do understand. And so now we can read. The exercise of diplomacy. The collective advances blindly. It gropes. It records the presence of new entities, and at first it cannot tell whether they are friends or enemies, whether they aspire to share the same world, or whether they will escape it forever. Unable to foresee, to master, it must govern. Its white cane in hand, it slowly takes the measuring of the furnishings of the universe that surrounds or threatens it. If it does not know how many obstacles it has to reckon with, it does not know either how many helpful objects it can rely on. Like little Tom Thumb, it can only keep track of where it has traveled. It expects no salvation except the recording of the protocols that accumulate behind it. Wander if you like, but always hew to the strictest, most obsessive traceability. The state of law depends on this fragile inscription of successive trials. No other light will come to help you. Fortunately, those whose difference you are discovering little by little are plunged into the same obscurity as you. You don't know for sure whether they belong to the same world or not. They too grope their way forward. They too yet they do not yet have essences with fixed boundaries, nor do they have definitive identities, but only habits and properties. Take heart. They are as frightened as you are. Once the question of the number of collectives is reopened, the other is going to change form. As historicity did just now, and exteriority before, alterity is going to change. It too has become altered. Fucking love. I love. I'm revisiting with someone, reassembling the social, and I love this because of that. This is like a really great. This is really great coming off of this. Really great coming off of reassembling the social. Um, a lot of this harkens back to the um, one of the beginning lines. Um, I have it posted somewhere. Let me find it. I sent it to Sunday. I'm just gonna look at my on Patreon. Let's see. Where is? Here we go. Here we go. I don't care. Just give me the comments so I can see my comment. Oh my god. Oh my god. I hate this. I hate browsers. I hate technology. The line earlier in the book is the feeling of strangeness that another culture provokes is of interest only if it leads one to reflect on the strangeness of one's own. Otherwise, it degenerates into exoticism, Orientalism, Occidentalism. It's a kind of harkening back to that little thing. That was such a fucking. I love this book. I love Bruno Latour. I just love Bruno Latour's writing. Um, it's just good. It's just good. As long as the collective succeeds in drawing lessons from what it rejects and excludes, it can be defined as civilized. It may change enemies, but it does not have the right to multiply them at each iteration. Ninja says, in other news, I referenced Latour in one of my projects. I recommended him to two professors. I laid out one of them will read him, but there's that. Yeah, well, hopefully they will. That'd be interesting. Oh, also, there is something I do want to. Where is it? Um, this line right here, like little Tom Thumb, can only keep track of where it has traveled. For people who weren't here, um, uh, for Latour, the collective actually has to undergo a changing in what it means for time to pass. I guess time passing is not sorry, events being one after the other are not the result of simply time passing, things moving forward. They are instead a result of a changing within the collective. And this is how collectives determine things. It is by reference to changes within them. It's how they determine what they're taking in, what they're leaving out. The big thing, one of the big things. That was like just gone over, but it might not make sense if you aren't here. And then this also just came up, and I fucking already forget it because I was so out of it the last stream. Um, we can actually go back one because it's literally soon. It's literally right here. Scroll up, go quicker. I don't know what does that. It's literally the last sentence. If we last paragraph. If we borrow Levi Strauss's powerful definition and use the term barbarians to designate those who believe they are being assailed by barbarians, conversely, we can call civilized those whose collective is surrounded by enemies. In one case, we have a contamination by barbarism, in the other, contamination by civilization. The barbarians see barbarians everywhere, the civilized beings see civilized beings everywhere. According to these two figures of speech, the danger changes meaning. Whereas external barbarians threaten internal barbarians with destruction, external civilized beings threaten internal civilized beings with new requirements. We might thus say about the power to follow up that it defends civilizations, provided that we no longer define civilization as modernism did by a position on the ladder of progress. There is no more ladder and no more progress, but instead by the civility with which a collective allows itself to be disturbed by those whom it nevertheless explicitly rejected. The state defends independence uh, without and autonomy within. Is not civilization in the reception of aliens a fairly precise way of retaining from the old state the essence of its vocations, once it has been liberated from pretensions to becoming the sole rational agent of history, the only totalizer? Yeah, okay. Okay, I understand now. I remember now. That's what this means. I understand. Uh I think what he means by this is one I believe is probably yeah, yeah. Okay, it literally my question's going to be answered in the next sentence. As soon as it believes it is surrounded by insignificant entities that threaten it with destruction, it will become barbarian again. Yeah, the right to multiply enemies, it not having the right to multiply enemies is because it it um it becomes the barbarian side. It's not civilization anymore. It's actually um um uh, barbarism or whatever you want to call it. It will become, for instance, a society surrounded by a nature to be dominated, a society that believes it is free from everything that it does not take into account, a society that believes itself to be universal from the outset, a society that sees itself as one with nature. Examples of barbarian collectives abound. On this account, we can see quite clearly the moderns have never demonstrated a very high level of civilization, but they have always viewed themselves as the ones who are pulling away from the uh, barbari- uh, uh, barbarianism of the past, the ones who are resisting the return of archaism, the ones who are supposed to bring progress to those who lacked it. By shifting from modernism to political ecology, we can say the moderns are closing the parenthesis that had set them apart from the others for a time. Or rather, after modernism's trial by fire, we might enter into a new era in which no collective could any longer, without further ado, use the label barbarian to characterize what it is rejecting. Uh, there's There's a line in Factish Gods. Um, we have never been modern. There are no barbarians. Um, I'm like, even in our dreams, especially in our dreams, it's it's fucking it's a fire line. I'm misquoting it, but it's really good. All the same, we are not going to wallow in multiculturalism and abstain from making any value judgments. Instead, we are going to start talking to one another again, as people should have done at the beginning of the age of the so called great discoveries. The collective has to replay the primitive scene of empire building, but those who disembark when they encounter civilized beings, or this time, civilized themselves. After centuries of misunderstandings, we are now replaying the tragic scene of the first contacts. As I have pointed out several times, the use of the word collective in the singular does not mean that there was just one of them, but that its function is to bring together a collection of some sort in order to make its members capable of saying us. So 210, so are we on 260? Might be on 270 actually. We'll go 280. 29. Oh. In an article that has been very important for this work, Viveros de Castro shows to what extent ethnography is wrong to spread the rumor that other peoples always designate themselves by an ethnocentric expression that means men or real men. In the case of the Amazon region, at least, a mistake in translation gave the first person plural we as the proper name of the people. The same problem arises with the use of the first person plural in the designation of collective. There is no people consisting of us, at least not yet. I wish I could fucking explain that stuff better. Because it comes up. Some of this stuff actually does come up in reassembling the social. The discipline of anthropology has served as chief of protocol to teach the moderns to enter into contact with others. Still, the rules of its etiquette hide a lack of tact that political ecology has to correct at the outset. Physical anthropology, in effect, defines the universal nature of man by relying on capital S science, while cultural anthropology records the variety of cultures in the plural. Obsessive scientism on the one hand, condescending respect on the other. From the viewpoint of the new Constitution, we cannot imagine anything worse, since those who are defining unity are the object of no counterforce, while cultures can accede to no reality other than that of social representations. If it wants to become civil, anthropology can no longer allow itself to meet those who surround it by asking the traditional question of modernism. Thanks to nature, I know in advance, without needing to hear what you have to say, who you are. But tell me anyway what representations you have made, the world and of yourselves. It would be interesting to compare your visions to the equally factitious ones of your neighbors. Oh, we're on 282. Oh, this is a long one. This is going to be a long one. At the University of Chicago, I myself experienced the weakness of such a formulation when I had to simultaneously to confront the anger of the socialists who were demanding that I consider cosmology as absolutely and not relatively different from the indigenous cosmologies, and the amusement of anthropologists who were demanding that I respect the diversity of the indigenous cosmologies, without requiring in addition that they confront the requirement of the unity of reality, the one that is imposed by the principle of symmetry, and that would have consisted in explaining the cosmology of physicists in the same terms as those of the indigenous people. They were all in harmony, as they avoided my way of posing the argument. The former in order to maintain the unity of nature, the latter in order to maintain the multiplicity of cosmologies. For the former, I was a relativist anthropologist. For the latter, I gave too much credit to the sciences while demanding that reality be spoken of once again. The naturalists were indignant that I was speaking of multiplicity. The culturists were indignant that I was still singing the same old song about unity. The indignation alone was the same, even though it was focused on exactly what kept the peace in the other camp. Everybody was pounding on the table, but out of sync with the other camp, and that gave the conversations a fine drumbeat effect. I had never felt to this extent the division of function between naturalists and culturalists. If thanks to the science wars we now know what effect the culturalist explanation based on cosmology, among other things, has on a cosmologist, we do not know, as far as I can tell, what effect being respected as one culture among others has on culture, deprived of privileged access to reality. Hold on. We don't know, so far as I can tell, what effect being respected as one culture among others has on a culture deprived of privileged access to reality. Oh, I think I get what he's saying. Okay. Okay. I didn't mean to do that. 283. Okay, so we're on 283. How many notes do we have left? Okay, we only have a few pages left. Okay, good. We're on 283. And then we're on 211. That was a freaking long one. Knowing in advance what the entities to be taken into account are, or taking them into account without the claim to reality that resides in them. Uh, each of these approaches commits an error. The first against perplexity, the second against consultation. But we now know how to ferret out. No, unquestionably, neither mononaturalism or multiculturalism could raise the question of number in a useful way. If anthropology stopped there, it would become truly barbarous. It has to change roles by becoming experimental. 283. That's the number I said. I had tried in my investigation of the moderns to make anthropology symmetrical in order to allow it to absorb not nature and cultures any longer, but what I was then calling nature cultures, two things that had become comparable against a background other than that of the old universal nature. The expression was awkward and the attempt naive, since no matter how hard we try to make artifacts symmetrical, they remain artifacts. With rare exceptions, anthropologists have retained the bipolar organization of their discipline. Still, the Viveros de Castro 1998. This is all the more a pity in that, as Marshall Salins has remarked many times, the notion of culture itself has changed since it was appropriated by the others as a very particular form of politics, what Apindura calls globalization of differences. See Apindura, 1996. As soon as we introduce the expression multinaturalism, we oblige anthropology to complicate the modernist solution to the political problem of composition of a common world. The word reminds us that no collective can claim to assemble without giving itself the complex means to verify, in relation to the humans and the non humans that it unifies, what they say about it after their own fashion. To speak about unity, it is thus not enough to anticipate a place reserved for all the excluded entities, no matter how comfortable that place might be. That place has to be designed by the excluded entities themselves and according to their own categories, as I noted in the chapter above. And back to 283. Let us recall that non-humans are always better treated than humans, as I was shown after Stengers in Chapter 2. In fact, their recalcitrance is not in doubt. No one would think of speaking of them without making them speak according to complex mechanisms in which the interpreter sometimes risks his life. On the side of humans, these mechanisms, these apparatuses remain rare. Whence the stress placed in this section on encounters between cultures. These are what we have to civilize. Encounters with non-humans, once in parentheses, political epistemology has been rendered harmless, pose comparatively few problems. With things, we always remain polite because they always know how to resist. Yeah. Neither ecumenism nor Catholicity, nor social democracy, nor political economy, nor natural politique can define for the others and in their place the position that is appropriate to them. Fortunately, despite the fears of those who always want to bring us back to the age of the cave, multinationalism consecrates not the victory of multiculturalism, but its defeat, for the latter served only as a counterpart to mononaturalism. The absolute relativist, if such beings exist, could not welcome aliens in a civil fashion, as they would react to such novelties with a simple blase shrug of the shoulders. Nothing in their eyes could make a difference any longer. With political ecology, we truly enter another world, one that no longer has nature and culture as ingredients. A world that can therefore neither simplify the question of the number of collectives any longer by unifying it through nature, nor complicate the question by accepting an inevitable multiplicity of incommensurable cultures. We enter a world composed of insistent realities in which propositions endowed with habits no longer agree either to keep the institutions charged with accepting them quiet or to be accepted by becoming mute about the reality of their requirements. The outside is no longer either strong enough to reduce the social world to silence or weak enough to let itself be reduced to insignificance. In the new sense we have given back to this word, the excluded entities require the collective to present itself and to represent itself at their appeal. That is, to say that it risks once again the fate of all its representative agencies. What the civilized collective aims at is not indifference. The outside makes all the difference. The collective becomes all the more civilized in that it learns to become sensitive to these contrasts. Nothing human is foreign to me, the Latin sage. Let us say, rather, nothing that is foreign to me is inhuman. 283. In the old modernist theme of the neutrality of capital S science, there is a profound form of impoliteness towards non-humans, who are said to be incapable of making a difference and limited to the stupid being there of inanimism. On this, see Bloor, 1999, and my reply. I remember that. I read that. It was pretty good. We're on 212? Are we on 212? Yeah, we are. What is going to make it possible to survey the borders by asking in a civilized way the question of the number of collectives to be assembled? If we have to be somewhat mistrustful of classical anthropology because it would accept unity too quickly, as it accepted multiplicity, because it would accept multiplicity only against a background of unity, do we have to resign ourselves to entering into relationship only in the form of ignorance, conquest, or war? We need to add to anthropology the competencies of a much older calling, that of diplomat, which can complement the power to follow up defined in the preceding section while serving it as scout and interpreter. Back to 283. 34. And borrowing the expression and the argument from Stenger's 1997B. Yeah. What Latour's saying is that he's actually a plagiarist or something. In fact, contrary to the arbiters who always rely on a superior and disinterested position, the diplomat always belongs to one of the parties to the conflict. Um, 283, they're on to 35. This is the key difference recognized by Schmidt between police operations interior to the established state and the condition of war defined precisely by the absence of any agreed on arbiter. This is why any war that is waged as if there were an indisputable arbiter from such nature becomes a mere police operation. The diplomat is franker than the referee. At least he recognizes that there is a war. 12. Where was I? Right here. But the diplomat has one peculiar and decisive advantage over the anthropologist. Potential traitor to all camps, he does not know in advance in what form those whom he is addressing are going to formulate the requirements that may lead to war or peace. He doesn't open talks by representing the social representations hypocritically because he knows in advance that they are all equally false, any more than he knows in advance that it would be possible to reach an understanding if only the parties could succeed in speaking of the common world always already there, that of nature, that of good sense, that of the facts, that of the agreement of minds and of common knowledge. At no moment does Diplomat use the notion of a common world of reference, since that it is to construct that common world that he confronts all the dangers. At no moment either does he regard simple formulations with respectful contempt, since any one of them, however impalpable, may hold the key to the agreement that nothing has guaranteed in advance. He consents only, quite rightly, to parley, in the fine diplomatic expression, and to make representations. He never speaks of what may be rational or irrational. In other words, the distribution of essences and habits depends on the talks. Never, and here lies the greatest of his mission, does he resign himself either to the incommensurable, that is, at bottom, to war. There was more wisdom in the disgraced figure of the diplomat than in the respected figure of the modernist anthropologist, because uh, the latter respects only because he scorns, while the former, if he does not scorn, does not respect either. What number did I say? 283. That's what number I said. Um, it was for this reason that Isabel Stengers proposed to put an end to tolerance. There is in tolerance something that is in fact intolerable if it is obtained at the price of relinquishing any requirement of reality, such as the deleterious effect of the ever so modernist notion of belief. The moderns believe that others believe. No tolerance is worse than that of multiculturalism. The openness of mind of someone like Hegel, doing by himself the diplomatic work of synthesis, cannot pass as a virtue either. He was doing his work all by himself in his study. It is fairly easy to come to agreement with those about whom one is speaking from afar with respect, while lodging them somewhere as a surmounted episode of the history of absolute mind. We weren't on 212 anymore, were we? No, we weren't. No, we weren't. He swallows his pride. He is said to be false and hypocritical, whereas on the contrary, he is indignant and he despairs of ever being able to discover what has to be reserved, what has to be rejected for each situation in the elaboration of the common world, the triage of the best of all possible worlds. How does the ecologist diplomat work? What is the secret of someone who agrees to seek the language of the common house? The one about whom one must say, according to the etymology of oikos logos, that she speaks the language of dwellings? That she articulates the collective? Let us keep in mind that she never opens the debates with the either or injunction imposed by the old Constitution, since he has understood that the preliminary condition had previously condemned all uh, poor parlors to fail. I don't know what that word means. I don't know what that word means. Poor parlors meaning. Oh, it's negotiations. That's what I thought it was. We shall reach agreement on the common world, on nature, all the more quickly if you could only leave in the cloakroom all the ragged irrational garments that only divide us and that refer only to subjectivity or to social arbitrariness. 2A3. Now we're on 37. On the history of this arrangement around matters of fact, see Chapin and Schaeffer, 1985, and Chapin, 1994. Whereas the 7th century had invented a way to put an end to civil wars, making peace over laboratory facts observed by gentlemen, the 21st century is reopening the question and discovering with some horror, that laboratory facts can be both real and contestable. As for the gentlemen, it's the conclusion. 213. No. Now she has to look for the difference between two distinct elements: the essential requirements on the one hand, the experimental metaphysics that expresses them on the other. In figure 5.1, which goes back to the 90-degree reversal of figure 3.1, we have picked up the distinction. Um, I think the 90-degree reversal is the changing of the facts versus value distinction, if I remember correctly. If I remember what he's talking about, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Um, just watch the streams. I'm I'm really tired, but I committed to this, and so I have to finish this now. We will finish the conclusion, not tomorrow, because tomorrow is a better day. Tomorrow is, well, a worse day, depending on what you think. But tomorrow is filled with not joy. It's actually not filled with joy. I'm probably gonna also almost cry tomorrow, but tomorrow is gonna be filled with other things, and so you actually can't finish it tomorrow. We might finish it on the 14th, but I have an appointment the 14th, and so depending on how I'm feeling that day, we might not. But the 15th, maybe, we'll finish it. I'm going to try to finish it before I do my 24-hour stream, is what we're going to do. The two opposing pairs do not divide up the possible worlds in the same way. Whereas culture never offered anything but a particular viewpoint on common nature and could not supply any enlightenment about its single particularity, every collective can participate in the manufacture of the common world of essential requirements, an expression that I borrow, like that of traceability, from the world of standardization, practice, and quality control. In other words, with the old principle of triage, whose essential was always already known, with the new, what is essential is still yet to come, is still to come. Um, 38. You're on 38. To the astonishing work of diplomacy by Salins, in which he grapples with one of his opponents who purports to define the Hawaiians as responsible for Captain Cook's death thanks to universal good sense, confused with the opinion of the British about God. See also the tremendous effort by Viveros de Castro, who has become the spokesperson for the philosophy of the Amerindians of the Amazon region, to assess the difficulty of the enterprise of justice. The Amerindians agree to define a common world would be necessary to change metaphysics. It is moreover from them, the intermediary of Viveros de Castro, that I learned the use of the word multinaturalism, since their collective presupposes a human culture common to all humans and non-human beings, in natures that differ according to bodies. That's very interesting. That's actually very interesting. Today I learned as for the expression, oh, sorry guys, I'm silly, I'm tired. In figure 5.1 is here, and yeah, it literally is what I'm talking about. We're gonna go over 5.1 before I stop. Before I continue, not stop. Requirements, expression. We're gonna read the bottom verse. Whereas anthropology classifies what it encounters as nature or cultures, diplomacy has to carry out a triage between what is expendable and what is essential. One nature, multiple cultures. Requirements, expressions. What cannot be lost without losing the collective can be given up as the price for an extension of the collective. Already unified without due process, but all equally without access to reality. Oh, I see what it is. Okay. How do I explain? This is probably a little bit of a confusing diagram. Diagram. So this line, and this actually, I'm pretty sure separate. So this is the fact side, and this is the value side, and these used to be what the facts were and the values were on each side. But with Latour's expression, which flips it 90 degrees, it goes sideways, and so it actually goes different. So requirements are 1 and 2, expressions are 3 and 4. It's the 90-degree flip. It was talked about. Okay. Okay, you just fucking something. Vampire Toothus also underwent a 90-degree flip, and so I don't. So figure it out. Figure it out. Sort it out for yourselves. Don't let me tell you. Finish your goddamn essay paper. As for the expressions, it is no longer a matter with the new touchstone of representations that are all equally respectful and all equally false, of worldviews or symbolic elaborations, but of a painful pulling away and grueling metamorphosis in order to know the price that a collective would be ready to pay to agree to let others come into the common house that is under construction. That is under construction, and we're on 214. Right? Right, guys. 214. And we're on 284. In the notes. Right, everybody? Right. I'm right. Yep, and we're on 239. To this oh so Catholic goal, Viveros de Castro always replied that his people in the Amazon would simply answer with a polite but firm no way. To be one world, to live under one roof, that also has to be negotiated, and persistently. I don't. Okay. What was the relevance of this? I'm already losing. My brain's dying. My brain's dying. What did I read? Agreement for in order to the price that a collective would be ready to pay to let others come in the common house that is under construction. Oh, okay, I see. Okay, I see. Apart from a diplomatic trial, no collective can differentiate between what is essential and what is superfluous. It will go to war over anything because it sees everything as equally necessary. Only slowly through preliminary negotiations, pourparlers, will a collective agree to reconsider its own constitution by differentiating what is essential from what is superfluous according to other principles. It will undertake this exhausting task only on condition that the other will agree to subject itself to the same triage. How far we are from the peaceful distinction always already made between the nature of things and representations that humans make of them. What seemed to make good sense was lacking in common sense. I gave an example of this diplomacy in Chapter 3 when I attempted to extract the essential requirements that found themselves imprisoned in the difference between facts and values. I then returned to the negotiating table with this sort of deal. If we were to promise to offer you better guarantees for the protection of your essential requirements, would you agree to modify the metaphysics of nature that appears to you, for the time being, to be the aptest to protect you, even though it originates in the cave that prevents us for our part from existing? Would you be ready to give up that metaphysics if, for that price, you could bring non-humans and the Deimos into the expanding collective? Nothing proves the diplomat will succeed. Nothing proves that I have succeeded either. It is up to the reader to judge. This uncertainty makes diplomacy a riskier call than anthropology, since the latter always knows in advance where to find the essential inessentials in nature, and of where to find the inessential essentials in representation. While for the diplomat, the smallest slip of the tongue is enough to trigger stoning by both camps. And yet the diplomat has a wild card up her sleeve that the modernist anthropologist lacked. She agrees to engage with collectives that find themselves with respect to the precise distribution of requirements and expressions, in the same uncertainty as the one whose name she is stealing. That is why they have declared themselves for so long to be at war. There is no common arbiter above them. Neither the one who sends her nor the one who agrees to greet her knows exactly why they are fighting, or even whether they are fighting. If metaphysics is not experimental, there is nothing to negotiate, since the essences are always already there, and the identities all the more decisively entrenched in that they are unjustifiable. But by no longer claiming to speak in the name of nature, by no longer accepting the polite indifference of multiculturalism, the diplomat who follows in the wake of the anthropologist gives herself opportunities to succeed that were not open to her predecessors. Civilization can contaminate just as barbarity can. For the first time, the other collectives, how many? No one yet knows. Meet a civilized representative who asks them what their habits and their properties are. And then we go back. And then we go back. And then we go, woo. And then we go back. I encountered it in Africa without understanding it some 30 years ago. It was only in Toby Nathan's practice that I myself recognized the difference between encountering a patient under the auspices of anthropology and encountering a patient under the auspices of risky diplomacy. If you don't know what happened 30 years ago, Latour worked for Orstrom in the Ivory Coast. I forget what Orstrom stands for. Naturally, those who cry, as did a well-known Parisian psychoanalyst, "Without a universal unconscious, there is no more Frederick Republic," accused Nathan of culturalism, just as the Socialists accused me of social constructivism. Through all these misunderstandings, we see the reaction of modernism, incapable of imagining a successor to the nature-culture opposition. If you want the encounter to occur on a new basis, you want those you are addressing to share in the common basis of essential requirements, you want non-humans to make a difference that is not only in fact, you are necessarily a traitor. Yes, this diplomat is a traitor, but he may succeed where the faithful fail, because he alone doubts that his fellow citizens have succeeded in already discovering their real war goals. On 250. There is always a tendency to minimize how terrifying it is for any proposition to be forced to bifurcate abruptly, in order to cut itself into two halves, one both rational and common, the other irrational and private. How can one speak the language of the Logos if, as the Indians said of the whites, the moderns have forked tongues? It hardly matters with what respect that a rationality adorned with the name of culture is surrounded. It hardly matters how many museums are devoted to it. It hardly matters even that a common structure may make it possible by a series of transformations to pass from one rationality to the other in such a way that, thanks to the science of anthropology, rationality ends up resembling an ersatz reason. The fact remains, nevertheless, that the collective encountered has been deprived of all contact with the very essence of phenomena. Everything that is essential belongs to the visitor who is teaching the native a lesson. The native is rich only by virtue of his difference. Uh, the visitor knows. Uh, the person visited makes him realize he only thought he knew. Uh, 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 Made him realize he only thinks he knows. Conversely, the the visitor, the person visited knew. I forget how it goes. It's the beginning line of Factor Scouts, and it's beautiful. It's amazing. Harkening back to that a little bit. 284.41. I'm bugging. I'm in a mood. Structuralism, like Hegel's solitary syntheses, had the disadvantage, not the same thing, of establishing the common world and its laws of composition. Symmetry, inversion, similarity, opposition, condensation, and so on, without taking into account those whose cultures were being thus unified and whose opinions were taken to be as vain as the secondary qualities for the metaphysics of nature. After recognizing both the importance of the distinction between objective and subjective and the impossibility of applying them, Levi Strauss sees no other solution than to invent a new unknown, the structural unconscious that enables us to coincide with forms of activity which are both at once ours and other, which are the condition of all forms of mental life, of all men, at all times. Uh, I don't understand what this is referring to. I need to reread. Oh, I do. I remember. I lied. Do we really know what would happen if, instead of the modernist approach, we entered into contact with the fashion of the ecological diplomat? Can one imagine the power of the balm that would then fall upon all the wounds opened up by the encounters that have taken place under the auspices of nature? The virtue of the diplomat, the factor that always makes him a piece of shit in a silk stocking, as it publicly famously said of Talleyrand, is that he imposes on the very ones who sent him the fundamental doubt about their own requirements. At bottom, he says to them, you don't know either what you were holding to before I got the negotiation going. You have just discovered how much you care about this treasure. You would perhaps be prepared then to house it in a different metaphysics. By doing so, you could increase the size of the common house. Would you be ready to shelter those whom you took to be enemies, but who have just taught you what you cherish more than anything in the world? We have put the plow before the horse. No, in fact, we don't care that much about nature. Let us define rather what we do care about, and then let us give this treasure a name that is dear to us. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Luke 12:34. To put it differently, Diplomat is charged with what the later Kant called the kingdom of ends. The ecological crisis, as we have often noted, presented itself above all as a generalized revolt of means. Nothing and no one is willing any longer to agree to serve as a simple means to the exercise of any will whatsoever, taken as an ultimate end. The tiniest maggot, the smallest rodent, the scantest river, the farthest star, the most humble of automatic machines, each demands to be taken also as an end, by the same right as the beggar Lazarus at the door of the selfish rich man. At first glance, this proliferation of ends appears untenable. Modernism stiffens against it. Then, once the modernist parenthesis is closed, a question that several centuries had left in suspense, unresolved, arises. Under what auspices must we unite now that there is no more nature to do the work in our place, under the table, apart from representative assemblies? The diplomat is not exactly a fourth power. He is only charged with leaving the question of the number of collectives open, a question that without him, everyone would have a tendency to simplify somewhat. Explorer, investigator, censor, he has the advantage of all the other powers of not knowing with certainty what the collective that sends him is composed of. More twisted than the moralist, less procedural than the administrator, less willful than the politician, more bent than the scientist, more detached than the explorer of markets. The diplomat in no way minimizes how difficult it is to know the terms in which each of these parties contemplate describing its war aims. His presence alone suffices, all the same, to modify profoundly the danger faced by a collective in quest of the number of those with whom it is going to have to compromise. The external enemy, for good reason, terrifies those who imagine that what defines their essence is going to be torn away. Barbarians frighten barbarians. But the enemy the diplomat accompanies does not put the collective in danger in the same way, as he is the bearer of a peace proposal that goes far beyond mere compromise. Thanks to you, we're going to understand the difference between our essential requirements and their temporary expressions. 284. It is slanderous to speak of diplomats as mere rug merchants. We take, for example, the debate between American creationists and evolutionists. We're not going to split the difference with an ill-conceived compromise between a world created 6,000 years ago and another formed 6 billion years ago, and agree, for example, on 2 billion years. That would satisfy no one. The diplomat goes much further. He demands that we put on the table what a god is and what an earth is. This is the entire advantage of an experimental metaphysics over the head-on clash of a metaphysics of nature struggling with the traditions. The same is true of the painful debate over abortion in the States. This was written, by the way, in 2000, 1999. I forget. I don't know. I don't remember, guys. I don't remember. I think it was no. Politics of Nature was written 2001, maybe? Maybe 2001. We'll say 2001. I don't know. I don't know. My brain is failing me. Finally, we're going to know what we want, and what this "we" is that says it is endowed with a will. The diplomat recalls that no one who doesn't lend himself to this work of negotiation can invoke the unity of the collective. In imitation of the third commandment against blasphemy, let us add to our tables the law: thou shalt not speak of the unity of the collective in vain. And then I think we only have, we only have 3 more pages. So we'll finish. We'll finish, even though my brain is failing me. My brain is failing me. We can do it, and I can just reread this later. Have I settled the question of the number of collectives? No, of course not. For history is not over and has no meaning other than the one that is discovered through an experimentation, of which no one can sip the steps or foresee the results. I have done better than to settle the question. I have left it open, while raising anew the question of the number of collectives on which war and peace depend. This, this is easy to understand if all the excluded entities left outside then advance in a civil manner toward the Republic, while aspiring to participate in the same common world without formulating contradictory demands. There is no state of war. With a single world, the conflicts will always be superficial, partial, localized. Everything changes, on the contrary. If one of the multiplicities demands the destruction of a given collective, its forced incorporations, or its capitulation. This is the end of the state of peace. Now, thanks to political ecology, we notice little by little we have never left the state of war, the state of nature that Hobbes thought the Leviathan had gotten us out of, whereas we are still deep in it. We've only passed from one nature politic to another. 285. Moreover, this is why the Leviathan, that mortal god to which we owe under the immortal god our peace and defense appears so monstrous. It no more represents politics than nature represents the sciences. Such is the error I committed in the book on the moderns by trying to establish symmetry between the artifact of capital S science and that of capital P politics. This is indeed why I have abandoned the principle of symmetry, replacing it with an equal respect for sciences and for politics. But it is now clear at the end of this book that I have simply attempted to sketch a more realistic portrait of a Leviathan ending the state of nature for good. Are we on 217? I don't know. I don't know. No, you weren't. You're on 218. The pacifying violence of science to find a single common world without giving us the means, interpreters, histories, networks, forums, agoras, parliaments, or instruments would have needed to compose it progressively. The power to say it was rational and was irrational has been exercised up to now without any counterforces. Lord knows that history has not been sparing of conflicts. To these wars, sciences and technologies have contributed more and more each time by broadening the scale, the scope, the violence, the virulence, the logistics of these battles. Concerning these offers of service on the part of engineers and scientists, it has been claimed that this was only a deviation from the mission of capital S science, only an unforced diversion from the project that remained that of knowledge, only a practical application of a pure and always disinterested intention. At a given moment, people thought, since scientific objects create consensus and harmony, capital S science will end up extending far enough so that conflicts will be only bad memories. The rationality of the primary qualities will indeed end up taking the place of the irrationality of the secondary qualities. This will take time, but one day or another we shall enter the land where atoms and particles flow. Otherwise, we'd have to despair over humanity. Or otherwise, we have to despair of humanity. Despair of humanity. The victory of peace is just around the corner. Then we encountered in the writings of journalists the curious expression science wars. At first, it designated only a minuscule matter, no bigger than a nodule on the skin. It seemed that certain postmodern thinkers would have liked to extend multiculturalism to capital S science, denying nature its unity, denying the project of knowledge its disinterestedness, denying scientific laws their indisputable necessity. Against this threat, certain scientists, certain epistemologists were mobilizing. They wanted to wipe out what they took to be a cancer that was going to invade the entire university body and to metastasize among hapless, defenseless students. Then, through a sudden mutation, one noticed the term science wars had a premonitory sense and became the symptom of a much more formidable evil. 285. We're on 219. 44. This is already the theme of the little Tractus Scientifico-Politicus that I wrote just as the Cold War was ending, addressing the parallelism between the wars of religion and the science wars. At the time, I saw no solutions of the distinction between force and power for getting away from the already obsolete opposition between relations based on reason and relations based on force. I thought the principle of generalized symmetry would make it possible to extricate ourselves. I had not yet grasped at the time the properly constitutional work of modernism that rendered such a move impossible. 219. Okay, we're here. Not only did the sciences no longer suffice to ensure peace, but capital S science made peace impossible, for put at the beginning of history and outside it what has to come at the end. We're fighting Lilliputian's battles against postmodernism. A great war had already begun, added to all the others. The sciences were no longer a supporting force as before, rather its tactics and strategies as much as its logistics. To the monster of multiculturalism has now been added the hideous specter of multinationalism. The science war has become once and for all a war of the worlds. In abandoning mononationalism, political ecology does not promise peace. It is only beginning to understand what wars it has to fight and what enemies it has to learn to designate. It is finally discovering the dangers that made it subject to a threat of pacification worse than the evil it was fighting. Indisputable objects on the one hand, subjects barricaded within arbitrary identities on the other. In losing help with the simplifiers, it is rediscovering the essential source of peace to which it has never had the right to recourse, because non-humans have been militarized in the uniform of objects, things, those partial assemblies capable of creating agreement, provided they are taken as propositions, convoked according to due process by our public, finally extended to non-humans. We have lost the simplification of nature, but we have also released ourselves from the complication that it introduced by simplifying the situation too quickly. No facility, but no impossibility in principle. No transcendence, but no prison of eminence either. Nothing but the ordinary work of politics. People had always wanted, up to now, to save themselves from the inhuman by appealing to capital S science, and to save themselves from capital S science by appealing to the human. But another solution remains to be explored. To save oneself from capital S science and from the inhuman by appealing to the sciences and to the proposition of humans and non humans finally assembled according to due process. Terrible luck, really. At the very moment when totalitarianism was collapsing, globalization was beginning. Are not total and global two synonyms for the common world? And yet, despite the ambitions, neither the scientific politics of totalitarianism nor the political economics of globalization allows us to discover the right institutions, because they have only reduced the number of concerned parties. Nothing is less scientific than totalitarianism. Nothing is less universalizable than globalism and its world-class utilities. It seems as though we always want to move from one maturely unified world to another, while short-circuiting the practical means for achieving this unity in every case. If we have not yet left the state of nature, the war of all the everythings against all the everythings is raging. We at least have hope of being able to finally to enter into a state of law of which the traditional form of politics give no idea whatsoever. The collective is still to come. Fortunately, by losing mononationalism, the collective frees itself at the same time from multiculturalism. Up to now, mononationalism, freed itself from mononationalism. Up to now, pluralism had never been anything but a rather facile tolerance, since it never poured out its generosities except by drawing on an unchallenged common fund. By losing nature, we also lose the fragmented, dispersed, irremediable form that it gave, by contrast to all the multiplicities. The moderns delivered from this formidable ethnocentrism of inanimate nature, can again enter into contact with the others and benefit from their contribution to the elaboration of common worlds, since the others, and these are no longer cultures, have never used nature to carry out their politics. And then 285. See this section on anthropology in Chapter 1 in the work of Descola and Palson, 1996. The universal is neither behind nor above, nor below, but ahead. We don't know what the diverse looks like if it no longer sets itself apart against the prematurely unified background of nature. Relativism would disappear with absolutism. There would remain relationism, the common world to be built. To enter into its perilous peace talks, the Logos can find no help except in turning to frail parliamentarians. And then we're on to the conclusion, but we're not reading this today, even though it's only like 8 pages. Guys, I'm what they call eepy, but I'm not going to sleep yet because I have to do some stuff. But I can't read. I'm starting to slur my words, and that's fine if I'm just talking like this. I can slur my words all I want. I can say all the slurs I want like this, but I can't say slurs while reading. Okay, that's indecent. All right. And so you're going to have to listen to the fucking sign and wait until like tomorrow. And by tomorrow I actually mean not tomorrow. I actually mean maybe Sunday, maybe Monday, probably Monday if not Sunday. But we will have a stream. Streaming's up, guys. Streaming's up. And then we're going to have a 24-hour stream. And then we're going to have a 24-hour stream. And you guys won't know when. You guys don't get to know when. You guys have to figure it out for your fucking self. And it's going to be 24 hours, so you should have plenty of time to attend. And so I don't want to hear your bogus excuses. It's going to be because it's going to be 24 hours. It's actually going to be longer, and I'm going to have to be up for longer than 24 hours for my stream. Because I'm probably not going to be able to fuck up my sleep schedule so that it's okay. So you guys are going to have fun. You guys are going to get to have fun. You guys are going to get to see me slowly enter. Well, Estelle, if I told you, I'd have to kill you, because it's a surprise. It's a surprise. You'll have to figure out when it happens. I can't. Nope. Nope. Not telling you. Estelle, I'm ending stream. Bye bye.